The comments, opinions, and views shared during this program are of those individual Freemasons and do not reflect the official position of a Grand Lodge, concordant body, appendant body, Masonic Authority, or CraftsmenOnline.com. Welcome to the Craftsmen Online Podcast, the only 5-star rated Masonic podcast endorsed by the Grand Lodge of New York. And now your host, Worshipful Brother, Michael Arce.
Welcome back to the Craftsmen Online Podcast. I know I'm not supposed to say this anymore, but I am very, 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 very excited about this episode because it's a first, but technically it's a second, but it's a first. It's the first time we are going to launch a new podcast under the Craftsmen Online umbrella. You've caught us for an episode on the Daily Masonic Progress Podcast as we welcome on the host of the new podcast. It starts today, Right Worshipful Darren Allatt. Welcome to the Craftsmen Online Podcast, my brother.
Thank you, Worship Brother Michael. It's great to be on board, and it's great to be working with the Craftsmen Online Podcast and expanding Masonic media and Masonic knowledge right across the globe. You're in New York, I'm in Sydney, Australia. So it's just one of the beautiful things of Freemasonry. We talk about in the ceremonies about, you know, how broad and how far stretching Freemasonry is, and to think that marvels like the internet and podcasts were able to connect over such great distances and time zones as well.
I'm really glad you started there because I was thinking about this today. I was doing my run this morning and I was a little sad. I'm like, I met this guy thanks to the internet, thanks to being a Freemason. And I wonder if I'll ever get to see you in real life versus just on a computer screen in front of me, but just how amazing and awesome, as I was kind of reflecting on that in the time that we live in, that we are able to make these important connections.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, not to get ahead of ourselves, but who knows, there could be a live tour coming up. I'd absolutely love to come and see Freemasonry over in America because it is very different to Freemasonry in Australia. We'd obviously love to have you down as well. We don't use the trail in our working tools. I know some jurisdictions do, but to spread the cement of brotherly love, and hopefully we can make these things happen in person in the future.
So if you haven't picked up yet, my dear listener, Brother Darren is Australian. It was so interesting, and as I talked about in the beginning, I got this email from Brother Jay Hochberg, who's a member of our working group here at Craftsmen Online, and he's like, "Hey, I know you're always looking for guests to feature on the podcast. I just wanted to put this in front of you. It's this blog called the Daily Masonic Progress Podcast. Check it out. If you're interested, I can set up an introduction with Darren." And so I started reading it, and the first thing that kind of jumped into my mind was like, where does this guy get all of these great ideas? And then again, where does he get the time to do all of this? So what inspired you to start the Daily Masonic Progress blog back in May of 2023?
I'll say almost daily because there are some days that I miss due to work commitments and just not being able to get it out there. A mentor of mine, Grandmaster Greg Levinston, who was the Grandmaster of the United Grand Lodge of New South Wales and ACT, when I was coming through as a Master Mason. He's a mentor of mine and a dear friend. And he's always been encouraging me, and he encourages everyone to go and produce content and to write something and to communicate your thoughts to the broader Masonic audience. And you've got someone who is not only a statesman, an absolute gentleman, but a leader in our jurisdiction and in the craft, encouraging you to go and take leadership and to go and put content out there. At the same time, there was the emergence of the email newsletter, where a lot of, they call it solopreneurs, are writing newsletters mainly on business and productivity. So effectively, instead of producing a weekly YouTube video, the solopreneurs or creators were writing an email newsletter. And the statistics, unlike a marketing newsletter where you're basically just promoting products and services, was very high delivery rates, very high open rates. And the basic premise is that if you send someone an email with valuable information, they will open it and they would read it. So with that encouragement from our past Grandmaster, as well as the emergence of email newsletters, I then look to our Masonic ceremonies, and they teach us to make daily acquisition or daily progress in the acquisition of Masonic knowledge. And I know how I have done it traditionally, which is going and learning the different charges and the different ceremonies. You've also got the self-development industry, which is growing, and all of the different stuff in personal development basically all comes from Freemasonry. Like, Freemasonry was the original personal development guru, for want of a better term, right? So if you think about everything that Tony Robbins says, that all of his lessons are effectively in Freemasonry somewhere. The same with, whether it's Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, or go and pick whoever it is that you want to follow for self-development. All of those lessons are inside of our ceremonies. And that's something that I've always gotten value out of from Freemasonry, is that personal development side of it. So I wanted to then go and combine all of those three elements. And that's how I came up with the Daily Masonic Progress newsletter, where to align with the charge that we're given as Masons and have it so it can be consumed in 3 to 5 minutes that you could read. Because I know a lot of Master Masons, apprentices, fellow crafts, and even past masters that I talk to, they always complain that they're time poor. Oh, I don't have time for this. I'm so busy, the kids. It's like, well, go and look at your phone. How much time are you spending on Angry Birds or Facebook? That could be literally, that could be a few minutes. And that was always my argument when it came to putting in the time to learn a charge and to learn the ritual, is instead of getting on TikTok or Instagram, open up your phone or pull out your ritual book and study the ritual. So the idea was that if I write a 3 to 5 minute newsletter every day, everyone can tick the box of making daily progress. It's little to no effort. Some people may want to go and explore it more. Happy days. But at least if I can give someone or give everyone the ability to make that daily progress, I think Freemasonry would be a better place, because I do see education as something that is lacking inside of Freemasonry.
Yeah, and that's what draws me to it. Like, not to put any visuals in your head, but when I get your email here in the U.S. in my time, it's usually when I get up to go to work or before I do my run in the morning. So let's say around 6 o'clock. And there's a couple other daily emails that are not Masonic that I subscribe to. But when I see yours in my inbox, I'm like, oh, yes, sweet. I got something from Darren. And it's like a great way to start the day. And then I think about it. And that's kind of the inspiration that's playing in my head as I'm putting some miles between me and the house and just like really clearing my mind. And as you're talking about this, I think our listener has got a better idea of what the Daily Masonic Progress Podcast is going to be about, and why I think it aligns so perfectly with Craftsmen Online. Our working group, we all had a meeting last year, and we were pitching what our positioning statement really should be. And, as a team effort, we settled on modern men exploring ancient mysteries. Because I think that's what really draws men our age, and has been drawing men our age throughout time, is what you're talking about, is taking these deeper meanings, but then finding out how to practically apply them in our everyday life. If you're a listener to our podcast and this is all new for you, you know what you're expecting when it comes to reading the Daily Masonic Progress blog. What will your podcast episodes sound like, Darren?
I think we're going to go down 2 separate paths. I think the first path is we're going to have, or I'm going to try to, still getting into the routine of it. So I may not succeed initially in terms of building up that routine, but there'll be 2 parts to it. There'll be a full podcast episode once a week, where I'm going to take one of the topics that I've covered in that week, or it might be something that that I haven't covered previously, that was from a previous newsletter, that it either performed really well, really resonated with people, or there are a lot of follow-up questions. We're going to do a deep dive once a week into that particular Masonic principle and really try and get into the weeds and the detail behind it, and effectively take you through the journey that I go through when I'm writing that particular article. So I'll go through a lot of thought process, a lot of breaking it down, and I'm going to share all of that in that weekly podcast episode where we'll break it down. There will also be some daily videos, and they're going to be shorter. They're going to be video versions of the of the article that goes out each day. So if you're someone who prefers to read an article, you can absolutely read the article that hits your inbox. You can also then go and watch the video, but the article will also contain a link to the video, so you can go and do both.
If we time this out perfectly, you will hear this podcast episode, and then next in the Craftsmen Online feed will be episode 1 of the Daily Masonic Progress Podcast with Darren. And then after that, you'll get all the links in the show notes for this episode. Just open it up and start subscribing to that Daily Masonic Progress on your own to guarantee that it is delivered into whatever you're using to listen to podcasts. We'll also have the link if you want to be looking for him on YouTube, and also the link to the website for Daily Masonic Progress, so you get it all in one shot. And again, I can't tell you how exciting this moment is for me, because doing a podcast for Craftsmen Online, and this will sound horrible as the host, was honestly like the last thing that was on my mind, and I was secretly kind of fighting the idea of it coming because I knew the commitment that comes into it. Was it your idea when you first started on your end with the Daily Masonic Progress blog that you were going to evolve to a podcast format?
Not initially. There was always some idea in the future that, yeah, I could probably go down that path as well. I did a couple of little experiments to see what that was like. I know there is demand from brethren in our jurisdiction going, oh, I wish there was a podcast with Masonic education. It's like, okay, well, fair enough. There is demand for it. So there's also there's a lot of podcasting is obviously very big right now and has been continuously evolving. But there's also not a lot of really good Masonic podcasts. Like Craftsmen Online is one of the best ones out there. There's a few others that are great as well, but some of them that I've seen haven't been as good as what I thought they should have been. They kind of really missed the mark in my mind. I mean, the thing is, the fact that they're out there doing it is absolutely important. And I just felt like there was the opportunity to take all the value that is coming from those daily newsletters and then provide that in multiple different formats, because I know in the car, I can't read an email newsletter in the car. And I may want to still consume my Daily Masonic Progress, but if I'm not going to get time to actually sit there and read the 3 minutes or 3 to 5 minutes via the email, maybe clicking on a link to a podcast episode, or if it's part of the daily routine where you're commuting to work, you're listening to, whether it's music or even if it's your other podcasts. I mean, my wife listens to a murder podcast every morning, so I kind of, live on edge.
Great way to start the day. Jeez.
Yeah, how am I going to meet my demise today, right? My wife's listening to another murder podcast. But again, right? So she's listening to these murder podcasts as she gets ready. So I dare say that there are probably brethren out there who have similar routines where they listen to these podcasts as part of their daily life. And I think if we're going to be really serious about delivering Masonic education, and not just to existing Masons, I think one of the things that Freemasonry has not done really well is we're 24 years behind the times in terms of the internet. As a craft, we've allowed 24 years of misinformation and wild conspiracy and just absolute trashing our ancient and honorable institution for the last 24 years because of the internet, because we've held too tightly to this notion of we need to be secret, we can't say anything, which is absolutely false. It's incorrect. And maybe that might be one of the episodes we do, is the secrets and how I actually talk about the secrets from a membership perspective. We need to be on the front foot, not just for Freemasons and helping other Freemasons understand more about our ceremonies, but for educating the general public.
It's going to be different than what our listeners here on the Craftsmen Online podcast have heard every Monday morning for the past 4 years. And that's what I'm excited about. I'm excited to give this new perspective, these new ideas, this fresh insight that I think is just so desperately needed. And it wouldn't be fitting if you were just part of a little 1-minute segment on this podcast. I really felt like in our initial conversation, Darren, you're much bigger than a screen. Like, you need to be in people's ears and in front of them with video and really be there for these brothers that are just, I hear from it every week. They're asking me, how come you're not on YouTube? And I'm like, well, there's a reason why. I have a face for podcasts. I don't have a face for YouTube video. Honestly, though, it's just too much work, and your host is overwhelmed as it is. So, but you will get that with the Daily Masonic Podcast. And kind of in that vein, I feel like the older brother who knows what the big present is that you're getting for Christmas or your birthday, because I saw mom and dad buy it and I've been sworn not to tell you about it at all. And that's how I feel about you getting started with your podcast. I'm so excited for your launch. Is there anything besides calling out the naysayers, which is an important, meaningful aspect of what you can do with this format and your platform, but is there anything that you're looking forward to that excites you about getting this podcast launched today?
And I was reflecting on that very point, and I think one of the key things that I'm really lacking at the moment with the email and the newsletter format is that there's not a lot of two-way dialogue. I don't think people realize that they can reply to the email and give me their thoughts and ask questions. So one of the really, really great things I'm looking forward to is actually having two-way dialogue with a lot of the brethren out there across the globe, and whether that's they want me to unpack a particular topic for them, answer a specific question, or dive further into something that I have previously covered. I think the ability to be able to go down the different formats around that podcast is going to open up a lot more dialogue, because I think it's going to feel a lot more personal than just an email from someone.
Yeah, I really like that you have that openness about it, because I can't tell you how many brothers that I come across in Masonic education, and I'm sure it's a problem in Australia, but it's definitely a problem here across the jurisdictions in the United States. It's unfortunately such a key part of what we do, but it's lacking in a lot of our blue or local lodges, as we would talk about it. And being able to connect and use technology to reach out to a brother on the other side of the world in multiple different time zones, ask them a question, get that light that you're seeking, you're really going to be making differences in people's real everyday lives. And I think that's a very special service that you're offering.
No, I certainly appreciate that. And also, a lot of the principles that I cover come from specific wording in the ritual. Now, I've got copies of Taylor's ritual, I've got copies of emulation ritual, and a number of those English rituals. And the words and phrasing in certain elements are slightly different to ours. Obviously, they're slightly different in every jurisdiction. Being able to sort of compare and juxtapose the different language used across jurisdictions is going to be interesting, because can we actually get deeper meaning? Can we actually get to a broader perspective on things and have multiple different viewpoints when a word is used slightly differently to explain the same concept from jurisdiction to jurisdiction? I was having a conversation with a right worship brother last night, and one of the things in our Northeast charge is we use the word, the ritual is now special, but the part of the ceremony used to be special, and that slightly alters the meaning. It was made for 3 special reasons as opposed to 3 special reasons now. Then because you've got that slight variation, it changes the meaning slightly, and we could actually dive in, and perhaps part of the beauty of this is being able to say, oh, well, in this jurisdiction and in this version of the ritual, this is the meaning it's conveying. Well, in this other version, it's conveying this meaning. You know, where do we find any convergence? Where do we find what is actually trying to be conveyed, regardless of whether the word is being used? And perhaps maybe that's things that we can get to the point where we get back to some of those deeper meanings as well.
Just a fun question. How concurrent is the ritual practiced in Australia? Is it the same across all of your different areas of the country, or continent, I should say, or is it different?
Country and continent. So in Australia, we have the United Grand Lodge of New South Wales and ACT, which is my home jurisdiction. We've also got Victoria, United Grand Lodge of Victoria. South Australia, Northern Territory is their own Grand Lodge. Western Australia is their own, and United Grand Lodge of Queensland. We also do a lot of work with our Kiwi cousins across the ditch, our New Zealand brethren. So it comes back to the history of the Constitution. So because at the foundation of New South Wales, or the Grand Lodge of New South Wales before it was New South Wales and ACT, we had lodges from the Scottish, the English, and the Irish Constitution. So when we formed, we merged a lot of the ritual from across those three different jurisdictions. Whereas some of the other states they may have had lodges from other constitutions, but if they were 90% English or 90% Scottish, their ritual will stay true to their original constitution, or largely true to their original constitution. So to give an example of just one thing that's different between us and the Victorians, so Victoria is south of the border, and is an installation ceremony, and just the positioning of how they proved themselves to be installed masters, and where they stopped to hold that pose was very different to where we do it in New South Wales. I think a number of the Scottish ritual based, or the Scottish Constitution based Masonic bodies use a due guard before they go into the sign, for example, whereas in New South Wales ACT we don't have that due guard. So there are a number of those variables as well, and you see someone who comes from some of those other constitutions and they do that, and if you've never seen it before because you're sort of not aware of that broader Masonic world, you kind of go like, what did he just do? What on earth was that?
We have the same thing here with 50 states in the United States of America. That's 50 different Grand Lodge jurisdictions, actually 51, because we have the Grand Lodge of DC, which is in a federal territory. And everybody practices something different. You just cross a state line and it's going to be, like, whoa, just like you're saying, what's going on there? Because on top of that, you could also layer in, it's also not practiced in this time that we are living in now as to how it was originally written. And when you start, extracting all of the previous versions of the ritual, you're like, whoa, this is, and add that to just the enormity of the different ways that it's practiced in modern times now. Like, yeah, it's really interesting to try, and that's what makes it difficult and fun at the same time, to try to pinpoint the origins of Freemasonry and like where values and beliefs were, but it all comes down to that same thing, right? Which is, as you had pointed out, ask one to be one, but we also say here in the US, like, making a good man better, and what does that mean, and how do we improve that relationship with deity and make that all part of our day? And again, we've come full circle to the Daily Masonic Progress Podcast and blog.
As Australians, right, we obviously don't have what I would say is the significant jurisdiction variances that you do in America. So even though I say, the ritual's different in Australia, it is different, but it's not so different that you don't sort of go, ooh, what was that? All of our aprons, for example, were all the same, because effectively, England had England colonized Australia, so you've got Scottish and Irish, but they all effectively followed the English regalia in New South Wales ACT. So we all have the sky blue aprons, whereas I know in America there's a combination of the sky blue aprons, the royal blue aprons, as well as the plain white aprons for the different officers. There's the top hat. We don't do the top hat. That seems to be, I don't know where that came from. Certainly, I don't think it came from England, but so there's a lot of these varying practices that I'm sure that you cross state borders, and it's all of, instead of eating McDonald's, it's kind of like you're now eating Burger King, but with the McDonald's branding.
We've been talking a lot about what the podcast is going to be all about, with the Daily Masonic Progress Podcast debuting today. Episode 1 is rolling out. Without giving it all away, can you kind of give us a little walkthrough of what to expect?
To kick off on such a high note, I'm going to go into, I think, one of my favorite articles so far of 2024. You did mention earlier that I've been writing since May, so we'll certainly get into some of the more notable ones that I've covered since I started. But I think one of my favorite ones so far this year is how to make 2024 a successful year, lessons from Freemasonry. And this episode is going to be about an operative stonemason in 2024. His name's Charlie G. You may see him on TikTok, Instagram Reels, Facebook Reels, or YouTube Shorts. And he's a early to mid-20s operative stonemason. And his work is just absolutely exquisite. It's really high quality. And some of the stuff he does is just captivating. So it's obviously apparent as to why he's gone viral. But it's really trying to take some lessons from our operative forefathers, and hence why I'm using Charlie as an example. And what lessons we can take from them to actually have success in 2024. So that's going to be the first episode, and I'm really excited to put that together and use that sort of operative influence, because I think as we've evolved from our operative forefathers, it's probably a good place to start with the first episode of the podcast.
My brother, that's a great idea. Let's get started with that new podcast. You will hear his voice every Thursday morning as the host of the Daily Masonic Progress Podcast. My guest this week, Right Worshipful Brother Darren Allatt. Keep in mind, you can open up the show notes of this episode to get all the info you need to, of course, keep getting more Craftsmen Online in your inbox, and also to like, follow, and subscribe to the Daily Masonic Progress Podcast, which begins right now.